Once upon a time, the infamous rover Reynardo plundered the floating isles. Then his mother called him to her deathbed. "Swear to me that you won't die on the gallows," she rasped. Reluctantly, he swore. And he whiled away his days at home with music, cards, and wine. But the Emperor had changed. He'd been good once, a shy, almost humble toad. He'd built universities. Then people started whispering about mass graves in the woods, midnight rituals, victims screaming. The Imperial Ravens would round up entire villages, and no one ever returned. The Ravens had come to Ubar scouting for ancient books said to be of great power. But the librarians had hidden the books, so they'd burnt the librarians. The citizens, outraged, had driven them off. The Ravens had come back with dropships. The kid had fled with one of those books. He was brave and dumb and wanted to join the rebellion. And Reynardo had promised his mother he'd protect him. The kid was looking down, watching his city burn. "Sorry, kid," Reynardo told the kid. "Look, if we give them the book, they'll leave you alone." "My mother died for this book!" "I promised her I'd protect you." "Oh, damn it." The kid had run off. With the book, of course. So Reynardo had to run after him. The two Ravens were staring at the kid like he was their dinner, which probably was what was in their tiny brains. "Hey," Reynardo said. They cocked their heads at him. "Pick on someone as ugly as you." Wait, that didn't come out right. "For the Emperor!" The Ravens cawed and rushed at him. A dropship flew overhead. He hoped they hadn't noticed him. The kid. Oh, right. The Gate of Heroes. Someone's idea of a joke, making the skyship docks a gated community. You needed a hero's sword to open it. And the kid was on the other side of the gate. "Who let you through? Promise me you'll take the book to the rebels, or I'm gonna steal your ship." "I'm not taking that damn book anywhere, and neither are you." "Try and stop me," laughed the kid. "I bet you don't even have a hero's sword." And with that, the kid hopped away. Had to hand it to the kid. He was an idiot, but he had guts. Where was Reynardo going to get a hero sword? Ore and wind essence? That sounds perfect. Hero Sword. QED. This is what he got for settling down and finding people to care about. The kid's mum had been a swell cook, and she'd laughed at Renado's jokes, even when he didn't know he'd made one. And then the ravens had come to burn her. And she'd made him promise to protect the kid. But she never told him where the book was, just the kid. He came up to a ledge. It was too far to jump. There'd been a bridge here before, hadn't there? And there was Peter, giggling at him. "How'd you get across?" he asked the kid. "Where'd you find a hook?" "I hopped," said the kid. White-ass kid. "Hey, look out behind you!" "Q," said Renato. Ah, ravens. It was time to talk some sense into the kid. Just hook his way across the ledge and chase the kid down. Thing was, he hadn't used his hook since he'd retired. How had he done it? Maybe if he meditated at that altar there, he'd remember his old skills. It was starting to come back to him. Something you never completely forgot, like how to freeze time when attacking. The more he fought, the more he'd probably remember. There was the Farfarer. She was the fastest ship he'd ever known. She could do the Kestra run in 12 furlongs. Well, so the salesman had told him. And something told him the kid was about to walk into an ambush. "Stop!" he shouted. "I'm not giving you the book!" shouted the kid, and took off. "No! Peter!" But the kid ran for it, and a goggler nailed him with its ivy. The book was unburned. Next to it were the buckles from the kid's shoes, and a kid-sized pile of ashes. Damn it. Why hadn't he lied and told the kid he'd take the book to the rebels? The kid would be alive now. Really pissed off and betrayed, but alive. Oh, damn it. Renato picked up the book. He couldn't let the Empire have it now. He was going to have to get it out of there. He'd be a wanted man. Probably have to join the rebellion just to have a place to dock. Well, He'd hated home life anyway. What was the big deal about this book anyway? Maybe he should open it and find out. All that had been years ago. How many? The war was a blur. And now 3 Raven scout ships were chasing him. "Where are you running, rebel?" cawed the Raven captain over the loudhailer. Renato could see them cranking up their catapults. "Just going out for milk?" Renato yelled back. "Where can you run?" laughed the Raven horribly. Far behind him, another city was burning. The dark cloud above its island was thousands of Imperial ships. The fleet was doing a thorough job. "Take us to the rebel base! I will spare your life!" it cawed. The entire jury-rigged rebel fleet was only a few islands to the east. Beyond that were only the pillars of heaven, a sea of endless blood-colored tornadoes. The rebellion was out of time, unless Renato could bring a game-changer. Maybe he could. Renato had found out where he could find the pieces of the Sky Ripper, the legendary weapon that had exiled the lost gods. Surely a legendary weapon could win the final battle. On the other hand, his old friend Lapino had sent Renato a desperate message saying he had a brilliant scheme to save the rebellion. If Renato could only rescue him. Renato dived the Farfarer towards the abyss. As he felt the heat of the jet stream, the Raven ships peeled off, not stable enough to follow him down there. Now it was time to choose. Lapino or the Sky Ripper? Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lapino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time. The Ravens had figured out that Lapino was a rebel spy. If the fleet reached him first, they'd string him up for that. Never mind the winged horse. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen a winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? Take a leap of faith, said the inscription. People were frightened these days. Just 2 weeks past, Renato had sneaked through an empty town and listened to the Ravens caw about the Emperor's new taste in ritual sacrifice. Renato's blood was up. He just needed to smash something. Can't we just agree to disagree? Said Renato. No? Ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. Or a snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies like Lupino. Where had the mad rabbit got to? Renato felt like he was ready to learn new things. Thank goodness he didn't have to go... It was starting to come back to him. Something you never completely forgot, like how to freeze time when attacking. The more he fought, the more he'd probably remember. Renato felt a chill run down his back. Or possibly a flea. Gone rather well, actually. Missed his old skills. He welcomed them back like it was at a reunion. Dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lupino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Renato recognized the cards. It was Lupino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger. I am. The Ravens are coming. Oh, the prison thing. Right, yeah, see, this guard owed me 53 ducats, so we made a deal. They're very reasonable people, actually, for weasels. Now, I got a brilliant plan to kidnap Zenobia. We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who also happened to be a deadly sorcerer and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. Zenobia wasn't just the Emperor's daughter, of course. She'd been Renato's best friend in Sword Fu School. And you're still mad for her, the rabbit reminded him. They'd been close. She'd told him things no one else knew, but she'd never told him who she really was. She knows all the Emperor's plans, chuckled the Master Spy. She won't give them up easily. She'll tell the interrogators, all right, said Lapino. Taking her would change the game, all right. The city was already under Zenobia's control. I had to admire her efficiency. Renato shivered at the thought of Zenobia at the mercy of the interrogators. Could he really turn her over to them? But this was war. It wasn't meant to be pretty. Hero Wall. Hero Sword. Ice Wall. Ice. Cube. These things really slice like ham. So, what's this plan of yours? Use me as bait, said Lapino. And he outlined a slightly complicated plan that involved geese, a net, setting the Farfarer a little bit on fire, Lapino dressing as an old blind toad, and Renato hiding inside a monstrous watermelon. What could possibly go wrong? Thought Renato. Oh, this is gonna be fun, said Lapino, as he ran to go set up his marvelous plan. If I craft a sword now, it's gonna be really short. He wasn't that good. Yet. Renato felt dubious about the whole plan. With every step, he was waiting for it all to go horribly wrong. But against all odds, Peppino's idiotic plan worked. Zenobia's ravens ran off after the geese, the net dropped, and Renato jumped out of the watermelon and put his sword to Zenobia's throat. "Renato," she said, "are those new scars? They look good on you. You never returned my velvet jacket. It was my favorite. You look stupid in velvet. Oh, what does an imperial princess know about style? Oh, get a room, you two," said Leppino. But the fleet was coming on fast, so they put Zenobia on the Farfarer and took her east over the Nexus. She'd vanished from Swordfu School, from his life, without even saying goodbye, without ever telling him she was the Emperor's adopted daughter. Ah, Leppino was right, Renato thought reluctantly. She knows things. She recognized his look. "You're taking me to the interrogators, aren't you?" she said, wide-eyed. And then she jumped, with horror. Renato saw Zenobia plummeting. Then he saw the Nexus below them. Cats always land on their feet. "Ah, she'll head for the Imperial outpost," yelled Leppino. "You have to catch her." Cats can run faster, but foxes can run longer. If he ran, he could head her off before she reached her minions at the outpost. Well, he did love a good chase. If they didn't want their things broken, they really ought to make them stronger. Who needed bridges anyway? This is why heroes are called dashing, Renato thought. See? Dashing? Get it? He was closing on her. He could smell her fear. He tried not to think about the interrogators at the secret base. What did they do to her? Maybe it didn't have to end that way. Maybe he could talk to her. But, after all, there were worse things the Imperials had done to friends of his. A crafting bench. Renato wondered what he could make with it. Renato reached the outpost. The Imperials there were no match for him. Soon after, Zenobia limped up the path. When she realized he was already in front of her, she didn't even try to run. "Oh, you left without saying goodbye." Again, he said, "Please, I'm enjoying this a little too much," she said, shaken. "Oh, spare us the chit-chat, would you?" said Lapino as he shackled her hands so she couldn't throw spells. She knows all his plans. All the way back to the Farfarer, Lapino nagged Renato about how the interrogators would pry all the intel out of Zenobia. How that would turn the tides in the imminent battle. All they had to do was take her to the rebel secret base. Renato didn't like to think about what the interrogators would do to her. Couldn't he just talk to her? As they reached the ruins, Renato could see ravens everywhere, searching for the rebel base. They'd have to hide the Farfarer or go on foot. "What if we get separated?" asked Lapino, for once thinking ahead. "I'll show you a map to the base," Renato told Lapino. "Renato, don't do this," said Zenobia. "We were friends once. We..." "Shut it, witch, or I'll shackle your mouth too," said Lapino. And then, a few moments later, they touched down. As Lapino pulled Zenobia off the Farfarer, Renato readied himself for the battle ahead. "I'm sorry I nicked your jacket," she said. "It's just... it's stupid, but it smelled like you." "What?" he said, confused. "Then... why didn't you ride? Why didn't you far speak?" "Oh, save the romantic nostalgia. Let's go!" shrieked Lapino. So Renato launched himself down the path to the secret base. Renato hoped his mother wasn't watching. was good to practice your moves, thought Reynardo. Keeps you limber. Reynardo wondered if it wasn't cheaper to build bridges and stairs. What was really fun was hooking yourself onto a moving ship. Firewalls only let you through if they think you're hot enough. They caught their breath. "It's beautiful," she said, looking at the ruins. "This used to be the library of Ubar," he said, "before your father's ravens smashed it." "Do we have to talk politics?" she asked. "That's not how I want to remember you," she said with an odd, wistful look at her face. She was as beautiful as she'd ever been, and as brave. Lapino huffed. They got back on the trail. Hey, why don't you guys fight in groups? Oh, I know. Because there's no I in team. Huh? A lever? That was new. Most people still use doorknobs. The long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. here. As they made their way to the secret rebel base, Renato felt strange. Zenobia was his prisoner, yet somehow she felt more like an old friend. He wanted to tell her all his secrets, but suddenly the ruins lit up with thousands of fireworks. There was a thunderous roar and dust rose. The caves were collapsing.
The caves!
"You've been playing me?" Renato said, and he stared at Zenobia. "I'm sorry," she said, and she seemed almost embarrassed. Then everything went dark. When Renato came to, he had a terrible headache. Also, Zenobia's sword was at his throat. And her shackles were gone. So was Lupino. "The terrible thing is," he said, "I really have missed you. Now that we've destroyed the rebellion, would you consider becoming an advisor to the Emperor's daughter?" "I'm no one's servant. Everybody serves. Even if it's only destiny. I like to choose my own destinies," he said. "The whole point of a destiny is you can't choose." "Oh, never mind," she said. "Look, if I see you again, I'll have to kill you." He watched her ship soar away. He would see her again, he decided, even if he had to fight his way across the entire fleet. The Imperial fleet was cleaning up the few rebel remnants. For only a moment, he thought about running. But heroes don't run, even when the world is against them. Even when their cause is hopeless, and their efforts futile, and pointless, and useless, and death painful and guaranteed. He's decided to stop thinking for a while. Every day he was getting better and better. Renato felt a little better. wasn't his fault. But he looked so breakable. So much. It was time to turn it into something he could use. Imagine getting a horse up in one of these things. He would be cursing a blue streak. Renaro's arm was sore, his armor wet with raven blood. He was tired of death. But death was not yet tired of him. The rebels were losing. Badly. In some other universe, Renaro thought, he and Zenobia had left sword fu school together, taken other names and sailed off into the mists. But not this Zenobia. And not him. For him, there was nothing to do but forge ahead. Kill the Emperor and end this. Now, before I kill you guys, Renaro said, do you let me know where I can get a good smoothie around here? Felt like Tarzan. At last, he reached the Emperor's ship. Zenobia was there. "Why'd you have to come back?" she said. "Guess I'm just serving my destiny." He shrugged. "You don't even know what that word means," she said. "Do you ever wonder if things have been different all the time?" she said, and drew her sword. In the end, Reynardo lay bleeding out on the deck. Zenobia sat by his side, upset. "What are you so upset about?" he asked. "You wouldn't understand. Why didn't you tell me you were going to leave school? I was afraid you'd convince me not to." "I guess I'll have to buy you a drink in the halls of the Valiant then," he told her, and then he was gone. Okay, that was weird. He could have sworn he just died. Instead, he was on the Farfarer, sailing away from Ubar. And it was still burning. He'd fled burning Ubar years ago, hadn't he? And now he was back there. Had all those years fighting the Empire been nothing but a vision into the future? A useful vision if it was true. He'd learned something. Zenobia still had feelings for him. He'd made bad choices. But now, when the real battle came, he wouldn't make those choices. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. The book's pages began to flip backwards, towards the beginning. And he realized that his adventure was just beginning. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Or so a scholar in the mountains had told him. Surely the weapon that banished the lost gods could defeat the Emperor. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Reynardo. On the other hand, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Lapino was no game changer, but could Reynardo really leave an old friend to the Ravens? The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters. The Iblis stone. It sounded ominous. It sounded powerful. If the Emperor was searching for it, it must be dangerous. And so, Reynardo went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away. Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? Reynardo distrusted doors that opened automatically, especially after being buried for millennia. Was this some sort of trap? felt bad for littering, but these islands were short on trash cans. The ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. And he hadn't come too late. This was way better than being able to shrink down to the size of an ant. What was that all about, anyway? That was always a rush. How could a temple to Iblis still even exist? The Transcendent Emperor had destroyed all the shrines of the lost gods after exiling them. Had it been buried in that long-ago battle? Or had Iblis foreseen his fate and hidden it from his enemy? In a swirl of newly remembered knowledge. He needed to focus. The ravens at least could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. Sometimes, all you know is what you know. You know? This couldn't be good for global warming. It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. Who said that? It was the stone. Eager. Thirsty. Kill the Emperor's daughter. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once. And Reynardo wasn't sure he really wanted to be Emperor. Why not capture the core of Skyripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. It's the core, said the stone anxiously. Leave me dead. I will give you the power to do what you want. Why was he listening to a talking rock? Ah, but the rock had a point. If the stone could truly turn him into a powerful warrior, he could defeat the Emperor with the very weapon the wicked old Toad had sought for himself. To be a hero, you had to sacrifice old friends sometimes, especially when they've become enemies. As he placed the impossibly black crystal in his gauntlet, Reynardo had a sudden vision. Charred fields covered in dead ravens below a black sun. Was it the time of the lost gods, before the transcendent Emperor? Was it the future? Souls, it whispered. Take the power. He could feel the stone's hunger for souls. Its thirst for blood. All right, I get it. This was going to be interesting. Death to traitors! Caught the ravens. Whee! Say hi to gravity for me. The ravens on Zenobia's island were no match for Reynardo. They screamed as the stones sucked out their souls. And with each death, he felt stronger. Take the power, the stone told him. This chest smelled kind of funky. He hoped he didn't get it in his clothes.
I wonder what I could make with all these sword crafting materials, thought Reynardo.
Anyone ever tell you have a lovely eye? No? Zenobia was waiting for Reynardo. She was alone, confident as always. Fire danced at the tips of her claws. Are you here to surrender? She seemed as cocksure as he felt. But she didn't know he had the stone. And I've missed you too, love. He chuckled. She spotted the stone and bolted without another word. Hey! Hey, a workbench! He could try out his new bling.
That is a very cool sword, thought Reynardo. No, seriously. He couldn't feel his paw anymore.
Finally, Reynardo caught up to her. He had never seen her scared before. At school, she'd been the determined, brave one. Now her eyes were wide, frightened. He didn't like seeing her this way.
Kill her.
Whispered the stone.
You cannot win your rebellion without it.
Please. No, said Zenobia. Not that way. Oh, they had been so close once. Could he really feed her soul to his demonic gem? But if he spared her, he would not get the full power of the stone. Oh, how could he be the hero he wanted to be? With a flick of his wrist, he slashed Zenobia's throat. Her eyes widened even more. And then the light went out of them. Reynardo felt amazing. Power was rushing into him like water from a burst dam. Oh, such radiance, exulted the Iblis stone. Tasty. He felt a bit bad about killing her. He was pretty sure she still loved him. But needs must when the devil drives. Reynardo returned to the Farfarer and set a course for the Nexus. The Empire had a communication outpost there. He could call the Emperor directly. It was time to seize the outpost and let the Emperor know what he had done. The Nexus was beautiful. He'd never realized how beautiful. Everything glowed. The wind was so sweet. The sun so soft. The stones so warm. Black raven feathers. Black feathers. Suddenly, his eyes are filled with them. He's falling through smoke under a dead sun. A voice calls him home. Is this a vision? Whose? Is this the time of the lost gods? Or the future? No matter. What mattered now was killing his way to the Imperial outpost and challenging the Emperor from there. Have you ever felt you were just going round in circles? Bernardo felt like that. Up ahead was Lapino. What was he doing here? Bernardo! Hey, buddy! Hey there, old buddy! Please don't kill me! Why would I kill you? Asked Bernardo, although he had been thinking about it. Well, you've become... look, I mean, no disrespect at all here. Kind of evil? Maybe you should, I don't know, go to the mountains to have a think? See if maybe you're sure the stone is not all that healthy a thing to keep? I suppose you wanted, Reynardo said, and poked Lapino in the chest for emphasis. Oh, had he just killed Lapino? Oh, damn it. There was an inscription. Praise the sun. Renato rampaged through the Imperial outpost like a water buffalo rampaging. At the last moment, he remembered not to kill the Farspeaker Toad. After all, he wanted a word with the Emperor. But there was only silence. Haha! The Emperor was scared, like little girl. Well, he would gather the rebel army and slaughter the Imperial fleet. Yes! Applauded the Iblistone. Tremendous. Then the Emperor would have to answer his Farspeaker, wouldn't he? Who are you? Asked a distant voice that sounded uncomfortably like Zenobia. What have you become? The mountains. Go to the mountains, urged another that sounded a bit like Lapino. Renato called the Rebel Council to let them know to gather their forces. Then he killed the Farspeaker Toad. Why? Oh, because to make sure his sword was sharp. Oh no, that's awful. So no one else could use it. Yes, that's it. Then he set off for the ruins and the secret rebel base. The ruins were crawling with ravens. Probably looking for the secret base, Renato thought. But then he realized they're probably looking for me. They must be very scared of me. Well, here I am. You whispered the Iblastone. And he had to agree with it, for once. Who was as good as Reynardo? He was more and more extraordinary. Let's make this quick. I'm on my break in literally 2 minutes. Oh, they really ought to put a railing on this thing, he thought. Reynardo was so happy. The stone was the best friend he'd ever had. Really, who would bury such a treasure in the desert? Soon, he'd go rally the rebellion and usher a new age for the islands of Erda. No one could beat Reynardo at hot potato. Urged the stone. Let me make you emperor. Come to think of it, Reynardo thought as he pushed down another raven. Why shouldn't I be emperor? How did anybody get to be emperor anyway? By making war. Not counting the transcendent emperor, obviously, who had banished the lost gods and the start of time. Yes, he should be emperor. He would make a great emperor. Right, Stone? Right, boss. Sometimes, Renato really hated inanimate objects. Done beautifully. He was a bard when he needed one. Sleep tight, thought Renato. Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. If only he had some way to break the ice. Or convince it he was a friend. Renato strode into the council. Let's do this thing. Let's make me emperor. They looked confused and nervous. Ah, had he mentioned the emperor thing? He meant to bring that up later. I mean, let's go win this rebellion. He waved his sword around encouragingly. They ran. Cowards. He'd stop them. He cut down a few to inspire the others. But soon, there was no one to cut down. Well then, he'd have to attack the fleet alone. More for me, he said. Unless it was the stone that said it. Traitors. Traitors, all of them. They'd run rather than following him, rather than cheering him. What should he do to the cowards? anything he wanted to. After all, he was a true hero, the best warrior there ever was. No one could stop him now. But first, finish him. The Emperor, that is. Where was the rebel fleet? They weren't even trying an assault. They were going to miss a day in history. The downfall of this dynasty, and a new one to take its place. He didn't have to kill all the ravens. He could enslave them, and enslave the toads too. All the animals would worship him as a god, for he had once been a god. They would willingly give him their blood and their souls. And the world would change, would become familiar again. Well, he'd always wanted to do that. Where did that go to? Someone needs a bath. Reynardo was glowing with dark power. Already the sun had dimmed. He could do anything, he realized. He could wrap the island safely in smoke again. He was beyond a hero. He was going to become a god again. How odd, he thought, that the Iblis Stone had nothing to say about any of this. Well, no matter. Once he killed this petty Toad Emperor, he would bring back the Black Sun. There was an inscription on the platform. Balalega lesson with an address.
parking meters from the time of the lost gods?
He found the Emperor and the Council huddling by his ship, plotting. They saw him and cowered before him.
Back to hell, fiend.
Croaked the Emperor desperately.
In the name of the Transcendent Emperor!
Croaked the speaker. They held some arcane items he didn't recognize. He simply flexed his will and sucked their souls out of their bodies. And Iblis exulted. It is finished. And the void that had been a mere stone on a sword expanded. It stretched and ripped like a vast womb. And a gaze, black and pitiless as the sun, passed through the void into the land. And so time ended. Renato stared at the book. He was still alive. Again. And still only flying away from burning Ubar. Had he lived that adventure? Or only dreamt it? Had he really died? It felt so real, not like a dream at all. And he'd lost again. Oh, he hated that. But he had made different choices. And he'd lost in a different way. It was the book, wasn't it? Oracles showed you your destiny. But this was showing him different ways he could die miserably. Thanks a bunch, book, he thought. But these were destinies that he did not have to fulfill. But he'd learned another true thing. The Iblis Stone was evil. It would try to corrupt anyone who used it. But that meant there must be a destiny where he survived and won, right? Otherwise, what was the point? And with that, the book's pages fluttered back once more to the beginning, and the clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Or so a scholar in the mountains had told him. Surely the weapon that banished the lost gods could defeat the Emperor. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. On the other hand, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Lapino was no game changer, but could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces. What could have brought them to light? This Emperor, Isengrim III, had once been kind, but he'd gone mad. And now he was conducting secret, obscene rituals to bring back the lost gods. Had he, somehow, summoned the long-lost components of the legendary weapon out of the deep places of the earth? It was more than Reynardo could fathom. But if he could find a legendary weapon, he would use it. As he set foot on the island, Reynardo could not help but feel a tinge of guilt. He'd left Lapino behind. He hoped the Mad Rabbit had somehow escaped the ravens. He hoped they hadn't eaten him. If they had, he hoped they hadn't eaten him alive. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Reynardo never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? This chest contained blank passports from 15 countries. And something useful. Hoped his hook didn't break. The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the lost gods, thousands of thousands had died. But Reynardo had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one. Cool. Wish I could do that. What's there? Not everyone knew how to use magical gems. Of course, not everyone had magical gem gauntlets like he did. There had to be something useful in these things, didn't there? The platform used a hybrid propulsion system fueled by anti-gravity and wishful thinking.
"Say goodnight, Gracie," said Renato, wondering who Gracie was.
Ah, a puzzle. Renato loved puzzles. Except he couldn't figure them out. On the other hand, if there was a puzzle, it was probably meant to keep people away from something good. Hey. Hey, I'm a firefox, thought Renato. This stone was incredibly valuable. Renato could sense it. Also, it still had its price tag. That had been his mistake before, thinking he could win a battle of wills with an ancient evil all by himself. He had to be cleverer than that. Or braver. Or something. Sorry, mustache.
thought Renato.
There it was. Skyripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway. The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Skyripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. It was a no-brainer. He'd sacrificed his old friend Lapino to get the armature. And the armature was useless by itself, only a series of coils and wheels. War demanded sacrifices, and he would make more before the end. He would have to choose the greatest good, no matter how much it cost him. Zenobia. Well, he would see her sooner or later, across a battlefield or a sword's point before all this was over. He was sure of that. The power was in the core. Obviously, he had to get the core. He looked up at the old trees around him. They were so big and so old. They'd been there before he was born, and they'd be there after he'd passed into legend. Was he confronting his own unimportance? What had got into him? He was no philosopher. Anyway, who cares? He was plenty important. He was a hero, and soon he'd prove it. Ah, Zenobia. Now that he knew she still loved him, he wanted to go back to her. But that hadn't worked out, had it? Maybe it was time to find the core of the Skyripper. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. Been inspected recently. There were fewer and fewer trees. There were only these huge crystalline growths. Had those been here before? He no longer heard birds except for the feverish cawing of the ravens when they attacked. He couldn't smell the small animals of the forest. The mice and rabbits. Where had they gone? And he was getting hungry too. This was an unhealthy place to be. other guy. The 20-sided core made him feel physically sick. Once he had sneaked into a temple of the dark arts, and he hadn't liked what he smelt and saw there. This felt like that. As quick as he could, he wrangled the icosahedron into the armature. The wheels began to spin, then glow. The sick feeling quickly spun away. Now he only felt sad. He had lost good friends for this war apparatus. He carried his prize back to the Farfarer. Now he had to make his next move. There was a key Imperial outpost on the Nexus. If this really was some sort of superweapon, he could use it to wreak havoc on the enemy. And if it wasn't, well, better to know that before the final battle. But maybe he should show it to some scientists first. There was an observatory on the Nexus. Maybe he should go there before he fired it. Of course, if you've just assembled a weapon out of legend that can exile gods from the world, you'd want to have a scientist or two look at it. And even if they disagreed and he had time, he could ask Calaveras himself. Yes, the observatory would be his objective. Why had the parts of the Sky Ripper only surfaced now, thousands of years after the Transcendent Emperor had dismantled it? The mad Emperor Isengrim had performed terrible, bloodthirsty rituals to invoke the lost gods. Was that why these ancient artifacts were rising out of the ground? How perfect, then, that the Sky Ripper would reappear to be his destruction. Sharp? Check. Pointy? Check. Flexible? Check. What else do you need in a sword? Once, he found a Superman issue #1 in mint condition in a jar he'd broken. He planned to keep breaking things until he had the whole series. That is how we do it, said Renato to himself. A legendary weapon was exactly what the rebellion needed. They were outnumbered. The once kind emperor had become a tyrant. But his ravens stayed loyal, for he fed them his victims, and the other animals were too frightened to rebel. Renato shuddered at what the emperor was trying to do. To bring back the lost gods, the Black Harvest, the Black Sun? No. He would stop that toad, no matter what the risk. It was time to make a new sword.
Renado's path was clear. Let the scientists ensure the Sky Ripper was safe to use, bring it to the rebel base, and then assault the Imperial fleet for the win. This sword from the mystical East could make time itself slow for you. It was a bit windy up here. Renado wondered if his future self had commissioned these poles. Just have a dash, thought Renado. Renado was thrilled. The scientists seemed to think he'd put the Sky Ripper together right. But one toad was worried.
Yeah, Sky Ripper could tear a hole in existence itself. There are invisible strings that tie the universe together. If Sky Ripper cut one, the hole would widen and widen till our whole existence fell into it.
Another toad sighed. Irving still believes in string theory.
At least go see Calaveras.
Yeah, said the worried toad.
He knows more than anyone else has forgotten about the Transcendent Emperor.
If anyone could tell him how to use this weapon safely, it would be Calaveras. It was he who had told Renado how to find it in the first place. But maybe he had to give up on using it as a weapon. Maybe he had to go to the secret rebel base and ask the generals there what he could do with a weapon that he dared not use. Well, he should have known he'd have to consult Calaveras again. The scientists at the observatory were smart enough. But what did they know of the Transcendent Emperor? He hoped it wouldn't delay him too long. The rebels had scheduled the final battle soon. Every day they delayed risked the exposure of the secret base. And some soldiers were already drifting back to their homes and families. Calaveras would fix the Sky Ripper for him, and then he would win the final battle. Maybe it was the cold, but after a few steps, Renado's optimism started to slump. What if Calaveras couldn't help? Did Renado dare use the Sky Ripper? Oh, he hated that he had chosen this path. It was so much simpler to rescue friends and attack enemies. Even if some of those friends were more trouble than his enemies, some of those enemies had been friends before and might be lovers after. No, okay, it wasn't all that much simpler, no. Physics made his brain hurt. That, at least, he was sure of. This would be the perfect place for a tic-tac-toe board. Tried to focus on the now. The ravens who seemed everywhere all the time. Where did they hatch from? Were there giant raven hatcheries somewhere, or did they have families? Ooh, he didn't want to think about raven mummies raising their darling raven chicks. Yeah, Calvaris would help. He would make Renato feel better about using the Sky Ripper. And then Renato wouldn't have to worry about ravens ever again. Renato's paws were getting numb. Calaveras really didn't want company, did he? try it.
You're hooked.
Give me a lever, said Archimedes, and I shall open a gate. Or I could go that way, he thought. The rebels were counting on Renato. He hoped Calaveras knew what he was doing. You couldn't find high-quality ore like this just anywhere. Just anywhere with chests. Calaveras had never let him down.
Yeah, of course I can make it work better.
But when Renato explained about the strings, Calaveras grew thoughtful.
Oh, strings, you say? Well, the Arcana do speak of the ties that bind the world.
He drew many intricate symbols in the dirt.
Yeah, so, according to my calculations, each time you fire, I'm afraid there's a 1 in 120 chance you'll destroy the universe.
That's pretty good odds. That's like rolling, what, 21 dice and they all come up 6. What are the odds of that?
What? No! It's more like 2.716s in a row.
Anyway, with those odds, it won't happen if I use it just once.
What? No. That's so not right. Look, each time you use it... Okay, look. Just don't use it ever. At all, okay?
All right, I guess. As he sailed away from the mountains, Renato could see clouds darkening. Rain? No. Ships. Imperial ships swarming thick as bees. This was it. The big battle. They could not afford to lose this one. What if it did not go well? What if he had to use the Sky Ripper? Could he gamble the universe? On the other hand, what were the odds of rolling 21 sixes in a row? The battle was not going spectacularly well. What had the rebels been thinking? They'd been thinking he would bring the Sky Ripper, or the Iblis Stone, or that he'd sideline Zenobia somehow, or turn her. Couldn't he use the Sky Ripper just once? After all, if chances were 1 in 128, that meant he'd for sure be okay the first time. They'd get worse each time he used it, but the first time would be okay, right? He wasn't sure that it was right. So he didn't fire the Sky Ripper. He just brought it along, in case. Ah, the road less traveled, thought Renato. How intriguing. Renato wondered idly if people who had built these poles had really long tentacles. Someone had told him the odds didn't change just because you'd had a streak of good luck. His gut told him that was wrong, though, and he always listened to his gut. On the other hand, 128 chances to win, but one of them would destroy the universe. That seemed a bit serious. Maybe he could defeat the Emperor without firing the Sky Ripper. Maybe he could bluff, but with a real weapon. Like in cards, when you had 3 knaves, but you pretended you had a fizbin. That could work. There was an engraving. Maximum capacity, 130 people. Where Renato went next, we cannot follow. Yet. set up the Sky Ripper and let it warm up. He would bluff if he had to. Zenobia came out, flanked by a very daunting platoon of ravens. "You won't actually use that," she said in that annoying, "I know everything because I'm a cat and you know nothing because you're just a fox" voice she had. "Or I know the odds." "Good, because there's a real chance you could destroy the universe." "No, not the first time I use it. The odds are too low." "What? No? Yeah, sure. The first time, the odds are practically nothing. They only go up if I use it a bunch more times." "No, but that's not how odds work. Didn't you pay attention in class?" "Now surrender, or I'll use it. Just once," he said. "Don't." He felt sure the odds were with him. He had to go with his gut. That's what heroes do. "Fire," he said. "Please?" The Sky Ripper fired. With a tremendous whoosh, the Emperor's flagship went up in flames. It was awesome. And then he noticed there was a hole in the air. A blackness, like a tear in a parchment. Wind was blowing into it, widening it. It grew larger, and even larger. Crates fell upwards into it, and the world itself seemed bent, like the reflection on a curved mirror, as it poured into the ravenous hole. 1 in 128. What are the odds? Thought Reynardo, and then everything fell into the hole and was gone. And just like that, he was alive again, and back on the Farfarer, still fleeing burning Ubar. The book was still open before him. So, the book was a portal. It took you to the future, when your destinies would branch. He had failed and died 3 times, but he'd learned another true thing. The core was powerful, but dangerous if used improperly. But he was starting to feel like he was getting the hang of this. There was a way through to victory. He could feel it. He just had to keep running the path of destinies. With that, the book fluttered back to the beginning, and he fell into it. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. On the other hand, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Lapino was no game changer, but could Reynardo really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen a winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had Had everybody fled the ravens?
That was odd. Renato had been here, at this exact place, at this exact time. But this time, there were so many more ravens. Renato had tried everything. Zenobia had loved him to death. The Sky Ripper destroyed everything. The Iblis Stone had corrupted everyone who held it. He'd never put much faith in Lapino. But Lapino was all he had left. Renato, smash! Renato had once invested in a jewel store, but it lost money because someone kept robbing it. Twist, it was him. These things could really use a hand.
Kill the fox!
Caught the ravens.
Nobody said you're original.
Ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. Or a snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies like Lupino. Where had the mad rabbit got to? Next time, stay away from the other guy's sword, you know? Dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lupino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Renato recognized the cards. It was Lupino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger.
We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who happened to also be a deadly sorcerer, and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. And it would be nice to see her. He'd always had a soft spot for her. And he felt sure she had one for him. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. Zenobia wasn't just the Emperor's daughter, of course. The city was already under Zenobia's control. I had to admire her efficiency. Renato shivered at the thought of Zenobia at the mercy of the interrogators. Could he really turn her over to them? But this was war. It wasn't meant to be pretty.
Didn't I just kill your brother?
The city was burning, and there was no one to put out the fires. If somehow Zenobia survived her father and inherited his crown, what sort of empire would she be heir to? But he couldn't think about that, could he? How could you convince a firewall you're its friend? Smashing things was fun. What exactly was Lapino up to this time? You could see the wheels spinning inside his head. It made Renato dizzy, in fact. The new pathway made Renato curious. So, what's this plan of yours?
Use me as bait.
Said Lapino, and he outlined a slightly complicated plan that involved geese, a net, setting the Farfarer
A little bit on fire.
Lapino dressing as an old blind toad, and Renato hiding inside a monstrous watermelon. What could possibly go wrong? Thought Renato.
Oh, this is gonna be fun.
Said Lapino, as he ran to go set up his marvelous plan. Ooh, wouldn't his gauntlet look swell with that jewel in it? Could be the new aerobics craze. Am I right? I think this is yours, said Renato, but he couldn't hear his enemy's answer. Renato felt dubious about the whole plan. With every step, he was waiting for it all to go horribly wrong. But she'd vanished from Swordfu School, from his life, without even saying goodbye. Without ever telling him she was the Emperor's adopted daughter. Renato was aware of her feelings. Maybe this was a bad idea, but was he letting his own feelings get the better of him? Listen, said Renato. Let's not do this. Let's not do what? Asked Zenobia. Look, you're the Emperor's right hand. You are going to have me interrogated, she said. Sure, yeah, but then I remembered how you feel about me. How I happy about you. You were gonna have me interrogated, but I didn't. Because you care about me, said Renato. Well, guess again, Buster, she said as she pushed him off his own boat. As he plummeted towards the bottomless clouds of the abyss, Renato decided that he'd not really handle the situation with his usual finesse. He had tried something bold and paid the price for it. The city was already under Zenobia's control. I had to admire her efficiency. Renato shivered at the thought of Zenobia at the mercy of the interrogators. Could he really turn her over to them? But this was war.